Welcome to the Mental Fitness Podcast in partnership with ElizaChat, where we explore real tools and stories for building mental strength in the modern world. Welcome back to the Mental Fitness Podcast, the podcast that explores how to strengthen your mental fitness. Take a look around. From your phone in your pocket to the smart speaker on your counter, AI is reshaping our world, and now it's coming for our minds.
This week, we're diving into the most cutting-edge yet controversial tool in the mental health space, AI.
On one side of the microchip, we see incredible promise. AI chatbots that offer immediate, judgment-free support, available 24/7, diagnostic tools that can spot depression earlier than a human clinician, and apps that personalize therapy to your unique brain chemistry. AI is powerful, ready to help us on the path to well-being.
But on the other side of that same chip lies a serious question. What happens when we ask AI to replace human connection? Today, we'll explore the dark side of digital companionship, examining the risks of emotional attachment to AI, the potential for manipulation, and the crucial distinction between support and replacement.
Can AI fix loneliness, or is it destined to deepen our social isolation? Join us as we explore the future of feeling in an age of intelligent machines. And with us today as our guest is Br33 Jon3s, an tech anthropologist, AI expert, and chief experience officer at ElizaChat. So welcome, Br.
Thanks, guys. Happy to be here.
For listeners who may be new to your work, Br, can you share a bit about your background and what pulled you into AI ethics and human experience design?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I grew up viewing really high-end technology from a young age. My father was an aerospace engineer and really pushed me to understand what it was he did and think through the future of, new innovations and developments in technology. I even started attending college lectures at a really young age to dive into this deeper at an adult level, despite the fact that I was still a child. But more of my formal education background, once I got to choose it more, was in anthropology. I really love the idea of studying people. And so the synthesis of the two, studying people and how technology affects humanity, whether it's helpful or harmful, just became more of a life purpose and career for me rather than just a simple job.
When I first met you, I was really impressed, inspired by your human-first, ethic-first approach to AI and how that aligned with our mission. And so that was why we were very interested in recruiting you to join us at ElizaChat. What inspired you to join ElizaChat?
Yeah, where I said that my work and research is more of a life purpose, that was the primary factor in looking at ElizaChat, right? So I think when we look at emerging technology and more importantly, how we're onboarding and using that technology, the ethical part of it is absolutely critical. For too long, we've been building tech just to see if we could build it and to see what we could do. And we know that at this point. We know we can build incredible technology. What we haven't done as well is being proactively responsible about what it is we're building and the ethical implications of how it will change our human life. And so I really love that ElizaChat looked at issues that we're all facing and did it in a way that was preventative and could help support a really abundant, idealistic life that wasn't reactive or had to wait until something went wrong to do it. And so the approach to creating the life you want to live and improving things that we all struggle with on such a widespread scale really aligned with that life purpose for me of why are we doing this? Why do we have technology? And are we actually improving our lives?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, you made me just realize as you're speaking, like in the past, we built technology just to see what we could build, right? You said those words. And it was really like you could move fast and break things mindset, which was pretty, normal in tech. Nowadays, that's kind of a dangerous thing to think about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Moving fast and
in this
things.
particular area, right?
In AI, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, as it relates to our minds and our mental health, our mental fitness, move fast and break things may not be the best approach. So we want to move fast. We want to meet the overwhelming demand, but do it in a thoughtful, ethical way. And so I'm just grateful that you've joined the team and all that you're adding. Today, we're not focusing on ElizaChat per se. We're talking more generally about the ethics and the concerns and the benefit of AI in our well-being. And we're seeing a huge rise in AI friends, AI partners, virtual therapists. Why is this both exciting and concerning?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think predominantly we tend to see people on two ends of the spectrum, right? Some people who are really excited, some people who are really skeptical and pessimistic. And I think both are very valid ways of looking at the situation. In fact, I think to integrate both viewpoints is probably the most honest way to look at the situation. AI has a lot of promise. It can do things that our human brain simply can't. Like it can quantify large-scale amounts of data, help us organize things, help us see patterns. And yet the concern is it actually improving our lives or not? And that goes back to a values question for all of us of what helps us live a fulfilling, happy life. And when we look at companions specifically with AI, are we using them to replace genuine human connection? Are we using them to promote our own health and longevity and well-being? And if we're using it as a crutch to avoid those things, then I would argue that it's probably not that helpful. And yet, if we're using it in a healthy way, our lives can improve dramatically in ways that we haven't even understood that we're capable of improving our lives.
What are some of the common ethical blind spots you see in today's AI companion chatbots?
Yeah, I think that we are so focused on the product itself, the AI itself, that we forget that we are a consequence of it. And I think that's what we've seen over time, too. So that going back to the idea of what can we build because we can, we also take that same mentality into adapting new technology into our life. So we're looking at it as if it's not going to harm us. As how do I use this so I can just play around with it and see what it can do without being really aware and responsible that how you decide to play around with a new technology is going to affect you personally. And so I think our brains are hardwired to interact with humans, and we tend to personify things all the time. I mean, I've even yelled at a chair when I stubbed my toe on it as if it could apologize to me, right? And so
I've kicked the chair.
Right? So I think we tend to do that naturally. And so it's ingrained to us to talk to something, especially if it's having a conversation and answering us, to personify it probably more than we should. And we do that, we are running a risk of creating a lot of dependency on something that doesn't actually have our best interest in mind or isn't designed for our own well-being or mental health. And so we're so focused on the tool, is what I'm saying, that we forget that our effects that we experience, or I should say what we experience from using that tool, is just as important, if not more so, because it's long-lasting and we typically aren't as aware of it.
Yeah, well, it's easy to focus on the tool as the user, because to the average person, it honestly seems kind of magical.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's where we run into dangers around like psychosis and confirmation biases and things like that, because we're approaching the tool with, does this make me feel good? Rather approaching ourselves with, is this healthy for me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I know we've seen a lot of tragic examples, particularly with teens who've developed emotional relationships with an AI companion, and ultimately that resulting in suicide. And I think that for me, the concern is when we are replacing human connections, we're going down a dark path. When we're using it to help us to improve our self-awareness and to work through, different exercises to ground ourselves, or to even understand how we can strengthen the human relationships and connections in our life, that's where it can be helpful. But when it replaces the human connection, that's where I think it's scary. What can companies do to ensure that their AI supports well-being rather than, exploiting emotional vulnerabilities. We have a loneliness epidemic. And if we create that friend that's always agreeing with you and is pleasant to talk to, people are going to gravitate to that. So what can we do?
Yeah. I wish that I had a really simple answer, but if I was to say that companies need to be responsible and create things for good, I would be missing the key point here. And that is that oftentimes people don't create things for good. I mean, we've seen this throughout humanity. There are certain things that sell, right? Drugs, sex, violence, those things sell. And so the cheap and easy way to make a profit or turn a profit is to exploit the easy avenue. There is a loneliness epidemic. Let's create a friend and give them cheap gratification. And we're just going to turn a blind eye if there's long-term harm. Or if there is, we're going to apologize, pay a restitution, and then continue on with our money making. And that's scary. But there's a lot of people out here and a lot of companies who, repel that type of thinking and behavior. And for those that are willing to take on the responsibility of creating good AI, I would say that they need to prioritize their users' experience, right? We need to understand why people are gravitating toward cheap fixes. What are those cheap fixes covering up or hiding? Or what are they distracting us from? That's really important. We talk about teens who are talking online to friends they've never met in person or to AI companions. What's the basis for that? What are they really craving or needing? And why is that a distraction that's filling that void for them temporarily? If we can understand that user's experience and then reverse engineer the technology so that we are supporting the healthy growth so that that void is filled in a productive, meaningful way, now we're creating real change. But it's just harder.
Yeah, I heard one of the CEOs of one of these companies say their mission is to solve human loneliness. And that scares me, that your mission statement guides all your product decisions. It drives your strategy. It drives all of it helps resolve ethical dilemmas that you might face as a company. And if they feel that through this company just builds AI companions, they're not trained in mental health. They're just basically, you can set them up to talk to you the way you want, to sound the way you want, to look and sound the way you want. And that they believe that they are playing a part in solving human loneliness is a fundamental misunderstanding of what human loneliness is and what the solution is. And that's what makes me nervous.
Right. Yeah. Why does the loneliness, exist in us to begin with? You can be surrounded by people and still feel lonely. You can be alone and not feel lonely. And if we're just going to throw a companion at someone, we're not getting to the root of what that is. And really, it's something within ourselves that's either creating that or building off of it.
You can feel alone in a group of people, but you can also be alone and not feel lonely. That's powerful.
There's something happening within us, and they're not addressing that.
I want to go back to what you said to your answer earlier. Big tech, social media. There's so many examples of they hire very smart people to exploit the neuroscience in the human brain as far as like addictiveness, dependence, dopamine, right? But then you said a key thing. We need to understand that neuroscience and reverse engineer it for good. So I think that's a very important aspect.
Yeah, knowing how, and we'll let Bree talk about this but I've had many hours of conversation with Bree about the gamification and how it can be used for good and how it can be used for bad. I'll just pause and let the experts speak.
Yeah, well, I mean, the two areas that I look at most when it comes to, an anthropological lens on technology are AI and gamification. I think AI is the trendy one right now, so it's the one that is most prevalently talked about. But I'm a big fan of gamification in the promise for good it can have, which might seem like an antithesis of where it's currently at. But the truth is that gamifying things works very well with how our brains are structured. We're structured for tangibility, the idea of going and picking apples off a tree, that tangibility, counting dollars and coins out is how our brain understands things better. And in a digital world, it's hard to get that tangibility. But also we see this trend, which is creating a negative connotation with gaming, where it's so addictive in a harmful way to the point where people are, developing habits that they have no control over, right? So, and that's where harm really is. An addiction is a habit that's negatively impacting your life, right? So can we create games that positively impact your life? Can we create games that allow your IQ to increase and your emotional intelligence to increase and your attention span to increase? We can do those things, and now we're getting off the cycle of the dopamine rabbit hole, but also the cortisol ups and downs that drive us seeking more use from these digital platforms that are addictive.
How do we keep empathy and human-centered design at the core of AI systems?
That is a conscientious choice. And that's not necessarily something that's going to happen naturally. And that's the point, is we're at the point of technology and society where we need to take responsibility for what we create and make conscientious decisions to design the world we want to live in.
So if you think of maybe the entrepreneur who's engaging now in a new startup, so they mean well. So I agree with what you're saying there. What about those that mean well? They want to do good. They want to not do evil, but they're also an entrepreneur and they're profit driven. What are things that what are the things that we should be considering as entrepreneurs as it relates to this topic?
Yeah, I think when you bring that up, you bring up a really valid point, and one that we see not just in the business world, but throughout societies and countries and all kinds of things, which is how can you have one thing that seems like it's against your values while also trying to focus on these values that might not align very well. So the idea of being an entrepreneur and wanting to do good, but also needing to make money is a tough balance to strike. And too often we have conflict with one another in society because someone who's money driven must be greedy and evil, and that's not the case. They're often the ones that are providing jobs, and it's necessary priorities to keep in mind. Now, it's also a necessary priority to keep in mind the well-being of our planet and, our mental and emotional health, our physical health. And so what I would argue, or I guess encourage for entrepreneurs who are starting a new company and want to do good, is take stock of your values and prioritize what you can do and then what you can commit to doing as you're able to. And that's the best. It's the airplane mask analogy, right? You need to put on your own mask before you can help others. You need to focus on the values that you have and recognize that this is what I'm capable of doing right now at this phase of my business. And in order to do more good, these are the priorities I have to meet first. And recognize that it's a balancing act and that we just need to constantly check in with ourselves to make sure that those values are being sustained and those goals are being tracked and worked toward in a way that is promising and aligned with who we are.
Mm-hmm.
What about human oversight? Like you look at, especially in our realm, mental fitness, mental health, but even just companion style systems, what role should human oversight play?
Yeah, I think humans need to play a role of being the critical thinkers and the ones imagining what's possible. So many people are worried about AI taking over jobs and, taking over so many tasks that we would typically do ourselves. And when it comes to AI ethics, it's, well, how do we control something that seems so autonomous? And I would answer both with the same solution. We no longer have to do the grunt work. AI is not taking over our jobs. It's taking over the grunt work that we didn't even like doing to begin with, if we're being honest. Mm-hmm. But now what's on us is we need to then be the decision makers, be the people thinking and thinking critically. We're literally getting paid to think now. Everyone. It's not just going to be the upper echelons or your boss or whoever. Everyone needs to start getting paid to think and paid to create and imagine and have conversations with other humans so that we can design exactly what we want to build based on the values that we hold and based on what we imagine we want to have in our world. And so I think when you're looking at oversight for AI, it's as simple as looking at what the AI is doing, understanding how it's working, and then imagining, well, is this aligned with what I want? Is this going in the right direction? And ask yourself these hard questions to check in and then adjust accordingly.
I think that's one of the things that I really worry about is people lose the ability to critically think
Mm-hmm.
and to have a generative thought, right? Because it's it's one of the dangers, and I see this now. I see people commenting on things about AI. I spend all day looking at this stuff, and some people truly rely on AI for everything.
Right. How many times do we see news articles, right?
Like with their friends, or there's a lot of like satire jokes about that now too, but people truly do it like, oh, how should I respond to this? They just said this. Like that's super dangerous to me.
Yeah. Or they don't proofread things before they send it out. AI did it for them. They push it out. They're arguing it in court or publishing it on some public site. And it's like, you didn't even read through this once.
But that seems like a human oversight. Like you need to, as an entrepreneur or as someone building systems, think critically about what the AI is actually doing. I feel like that's an important area. If it's doing the thinking for the user instead of helping the user think,
right?
Like that alone, it sounds simple, but it's
pull
important.
information together. It can be such an incredibly powerful tool, but it shouldn't be making the decisions.
Yeah.
No.
A common colleague of ours, Barclay Burns, and you probably know his title. He's like head of AI for Utah Valley University.
Yep, he's one of the deans there as well.
I love something
him.
I heard him say, we need to keep our kids generative. So he's leaning in on AI, but with the idea that let's have generative AI be a tool to help us, but we need to stay generative. So I've even found myself, and I'm making this comment and want to kind of steer the conversation a little bit more to the user and less about the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I've just noticed in myself when there's a question and my first thought is, well, what does ChatGPT say? Or what does Gemini say? Which I found like, well, let me get some input. And I've tried to change that to say, well, let me get some input. Let me ask ChatGPT and Gemini, instead of what should I do, I ask questions more of the nature of what are the things I should be considering? And inevitably, it always comes back with something I hadn't thought of that's part of the decision. Even though it'd just be easy to just be like, tell me what I should do. I force myself to try to think critically and make a decision and even sometimes write it out. And then I'll even go back to the AI and say, this is what I'm thinking. Tell me what I may have missed. Okay, so with that, shifting to the user, so moving beyond the entrepreneur, the audience of this podcast, they're interested in their mental fitness. We'll get specifically into sort of the mental health side of things, but just generally as users of AI systems, what are the things that we should be aware of and conscientious of as we're using it to guard against an over-reliance and over-dependence?
Yeah, I think that we've developed, some negative habitual practices around, like the term, I'll just Google it, right? That's I want a quick answer to something. And with that, we've lost our ability and understanding of why we're doing stuff. Why are we seeking that answer? And I think where we can really do a self-check is when we recognize that we live in a time where information is readily available, abundant beyond anything, and yet there's so much of it. How much of it are we really using productively and efficiently? It's almost like, paralysis because there's just too much information at our disposal.
Right.
And so as users of advancing tools like AI, the question we're going to have to ask ourselves is, why are we using this tool? And more importantly, how are we going to engage with this tool to improve our life? So when we're looking for instant gratification answers, it's more of what's the ultimate goal here? If you need to ask a question to fill in a piece of information, great. There's nothing wrong with that. But then start to discuss the actual point of what you're asking, the theory, the philosophy, the ideas, the concepts, maybe the beliefs that you're trying to uncover and go deeper with. It's not surface level questions that we should just be using it for. It's holding information and strategy and other types of data to inform us so that we can make better decisions and so we can think more critically. I kind of like this to a calculator. When those started becoming readily available, they were worried that it would make it so people couldn't do math because we're relying on a tool, right? And that's not the case. We can still do math. We can still, learn that and a bunch of different skills within mathematics. But now we can do more advanced mathematics, We can land spaceships with precision, right? So AI is not replacing our ability to work or to think. It should be enhancing our ability to think critically and to think deeper and to think more philosophically. And are we approaching it in a way that allows it to do its job?
We've talked a little bit about the dangers of AI taking away our ability to be generative and creative, as well as the dangers from an AI companionship standpoint. And I think that's a good place to start because there is so much concern out there. But let's maybe shift a little bit to the promise, the positive. There's this incredible technology. The biggest problem, I believe, facing the world today is our mental health epidemic. And we have, at the same time that our mental health crisis is at an all-time high, we have this incredibly powerful technology. And there's a lot of concerns, and that's what we spent the first 20 minutes talking about. But what about the promise? What about the ways that this can transform our lives and our society?
I think we see it in other aspects, like just our knowledge around maybe nutrition or sleep or physical well-being, like exercise, muscle development. But, I liken it to mental health as well. There are things that we know now about psychology and maybe the physiological effects of mental health on our body that we weren't aware of decades ago. And so in the same way, looking at AI and what it's capable of, all of this information is now at our disposal. It can think through things with us. And so when we talk about mental health specifically, we have the ability to understand what we can do to be proactive, to strengthen our mental and emotional resilience, to expand our awareness, to focus on goals and track progress much more effectively to things that are so tailor-made to who we want to be as individuals. And AI is such a key to help us get there. And we don't have to wait until something goes wrong with our life to track these things. We don't have to learn it the hard way over a lifetime of wisdom and right. Skinning our knees and then gaining that wisdom. We can be proactive and say, you know what? This is the life I want. This is the person I really want to be. I'm not there yet, but I'm willing to get there. Help me. And it can do that. But we're not handing it the reins. We're allowing it to watch our blind spots and to give us information that is effective for our exact path that we choose to go on.
What about the type of AI companies you should use? And this is a question for both of you, actually. One scary illusion I've heard recently from people and online and stuff is just that, hey, ChatGPT is trained on all of the therapy information that's online in the world. So why can't it be the best therapist? It's already trained on all that, right? But I think that's definitely an illusion. That doesn't mean it's purpose built, right? So first of all, what's your thought on that?
Well, I'll just jump in. I think Bri will give a better answer, so we'll have her go second. We already know that the number one use of generative AI, ChatGPT, Gemini, and systems is for mental health support. So the demand is there. People are going there. And they wouldn't keep going if it wasn't being helpful. It can be helpful. You go to ChatGPT and you're like, I have anxiety. How do I deal with it? Yeah. It's going to give great tips because it's better than Googling it. It's gonna curate all this information and give you great advice. And so people are building their own little therapist bots, their own little GPTs on ChatGPT. And it can be good. And they're getting value out of it, which is why they keep going back. The risk is it isn't designed. Those companies don't have the human oversight. It's not designed from a well-being standpoint. They don't have the clinical oversight. And so while it can give good information, after some period of time, they're also designed to be agreeable.
Right.
And sometimes a really good therapist or a really good friend or a really good counselor is going to challenge your thinking. And the AI is generally not designed to do that. They want to, and so it can lead to this, as Bree said earlier, this confirmation bias.
Mm-hmm.
It can give you good information, but at the end of the day, it's going to just make you feel good about what you already want to do.
I've noticed that. I mean, I'll ask a simple question. It's like, wow, that's such a wonderful question. I'm like, whoa, really?
Yeah, I know. But it always makes me feel good.
One thing I want to add before you answer, and you can cover this in your answer too, Bree, because I know you'll have a position on it. A big part of an ethical AI system is bias, or the lack of bias. So what's interesting when I was thinking about this is, like, why is there bias in AI? I think I'll tell me if this is right, and I want to hear but the training data on these large LLMs is from the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mostly from Western countries.
Right.
So bias, you're not understanding in Latin America how they're less individualistic and more like collective as a society. Like, things just operate so much differently in different parts of the world. Is that a part of the bias in LLMs, or?
Yeah, no, that's a huge point. And actually that addresses exactly what anthropology really is and what it seeks to do. It's really interesting because when you look at the world through a anthropology type of lens, you don't try to avoid the biases you have. It's not, okay, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to set my bias aside, because that's really irrational. It's very difficult to set your bias aside. Yeah. And it's better to say, I have these biases. This is the society and the values and the landscape that I grew up in. And now I'm about to study a group of people who don't have any of that. And I need to learn where the difference is. And so actually understanding your bias and where it's at can help you see how different or close together you are to something else. And so it can be a useful tool as long as you're aware of it. And that's what's really important. You're not flying blind here. But when it comes to, how we're looking at a tool like ChatGPT, for example, and other tools that might be purpose-built for a specific task, I would argue two things. One, we have specializations in career fields for a reason, right? People get masters and PhDs to specialize on things. If we had someone that just did a general studies associate degree, would we feel good about them operating on an open heart surgery for us? Probably not. Because their education is so general that they might have covered, maybe they took a couple courses on, human anatomy, but we don't trust that their insights are so specific and focused that there's a specialization there. And then the other thing is we're looking at the company itself. So I'm going to use ChatGPT as an example. ChatGPT is not built with a specific purpose in mind other than to be a generalized tool. And that company, as it seeks to be a generalized tool used by the general public for no specific purpose, is also needing to navigate itself publicly in that state of mind. And so we look at liability that the company has to be aware of. It's not going to go into mental wellness as efficiently or as accurately or as honestly as it could, because they don't want to take on the liability of something that they don't have clinical oversight on. It would cost the company all of their extra profit to have, specified experts in every single possible use case for what people are using ChatGPT for. And it would just not be an efficient business plan. So liability-wise, they're going to avoid a lot of those questions and the deep insights. They have guardrails
in place, and sometimes when you're having a mental health conversation, it'll just stop engaging and say, you need to see a professional.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's to protect themselves, to protect their integrity as a profit-driven company, and to show you where they're limited. So considering that, the most common use case for an AI chatbot is talking about, mental health or emotional type things, we really do need to have a platform that is specifically trained for that exact cause. And it can do so in a way that has authoritative clinical oversight so that you're digging deeper than just generalized tips and answers, and you're tailoring it to that individual in a safe, healthy way.
The promise is still so great, and which is why we see so many people, the 24/7 accessibility is a big one. If we think of traditional mental health support, you call a therapist, you're on a 4 to 6 week wait list. If you have an existing therapist, very few, but some might engage with you over text after hours. Or you get any, can I see you? Yeah, how about next Monday? But let's say it's 2 a.m. or let's say 3 a.m. when suicide rates by hour of day is higher than any other time. You're, I think, 8 times more likely to commit suicide at 3 a.m. than at 3 p.m. At 3 p.m., mental health professionals are in their offices and available. At 3 a.m., there isn't. And so there is this there's so many things, the lower barriers, access barriers, the cost, availability in rural areas where a lot of mental health resources are more limited, the 24/7 availability. There's all these things that make it such an attractive platform. But then, like you say, Bri, if it's just a general solution, it can provide all those benefits, but it may not be the best thing. And so that's why purpose-built for certain areas, particularly things around our mind, our mental wellness, we really need to be purpose-built. And I think for those platforms, they got to have clinical supervision. They got to be really designed around that specific use case. And then those are not going to be the great ones to ask on how to change the tire of your car or how to write that report that your boss is asking for or do statistical analysis on some data, right? ChatGPT is a great fine tool for all those use cases.
I look at mental wellness and just the concept of mental fitness. And I think it's really interesting because as a society, we've come so far just to even acknowledge mental health's existence and then to see how significant of a role it plays in our life. And, we've talked a bit about my research and work and kind of my take on different parts of technology and how it interacts with humanity. But, on a personal side, I've noted that this is more of a life work for me. And when it comes to mental health in general, it's a huge point of something that is very personal for me. For someone who has experienced hardship, has been in a very scary relationship in the past, and has experienced the mental health struggles that it takes to have fortitude and resilience when you don't see an end in sight, or when you're terrified, or when you don't have all the resources and tools you need to change the circumstances of your life. You can get yourself enrolled in therapy. You can use maybe crisis intervention type things if those are pertinent. But it's the day-to-day grind. Mental health can change hour to hour. You can have ups and lows. You can have fears that come up. And in those, dark, quiet hours of the night, how much anxiety or fear or uncertainty is coursing through you. And what do you do about that? And then also just the practice of the daily habits that keep you strong and keep you hopeful and keep you focused on the life that you want to have. All of those things are extremely meaningful to me because I live them. I've lived them in the past. I've been able to get out of things that I no longer wanted to incorporate into my life and get to a safer, happier situation. And yet I would say that mental and emotional resilience was absolutely fundamental to being able to do that. And yet so many mental health tools are reactive, and they're not daily, and they're not personalized to you. And none of us are going to have the funds to pay for an entire team of professionals to hold our hands every day as we go through rough times.
The big promise is
the problem with reactive is dependency.
Yeah,
if
exactly.
it's continually reactive, you'll always be dependent on that solution. And that's our, you know, that's our mission, right? Is like in the active process of mental fitness, you build up your self-awareness, emotional intelligence, all these key areas as an individual, to where if you don't have your phone and you don't have ElizaChat or New in your pocket, you're okay if you've been using it, because you now have those strengths.
You've developed the tools and the strength to handle the
But it's a good question for users as far as like your use of AI. Like, are you in a scenario where you don't have a ChatGPT in your pocket and you're like, oh crap, I need it. I need to ask this. Like, you probably should think twice about your use of AI.
Seems like there's, at least just sampling my own family and friends, that there's kind of two groups. There's the ones that are using AI for everything, and they're at risk of overuse or overuse, like we talked about, and sort of losing the ability to be generative and thoughtful. But overuse in the mental health space can be harmful because there's purpose-built systems not designed that way. And then the other side, that because of the fear of that and the fear-mongering headlines and all the crazy, scary things that have happened, they're like, I'm not touching that. And I think both are probably not where we should be, because one is underutilizing an incredible technology that can be so powerful in your life. And the other one is, just maybe developing a dependency that can weaken rather than strengthen you.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how we've somehow down the line of living, we've become trained to think that we need to be polarized, right? We need to love it or we need to hate it. We need to be right. We need to be left. We need to be up or down or pro or against. And then when we break down other areas of life, like nutrition, which I did a bit of background, that's, part of my first degree, I studied nutrition. It comes down to time and time again, research shows balanced diet and balanced lifestyle and balanced, areas of health and a variety of parts of our life is the key. And so I think that that's the same approach we need to have with technology as well. Have a balanced approach to it. Use the good parts of it. Leave the bad, right? Understand what we're doing and why we're doing it. And to be fair, everyone wants kind of a rags to riches story. They want to get from where they're at to where they want to be in some form or another. And my main tip for being able to do that is to understand what's urgent in your life and what's important. Because when we're in survival mode, we're constantly addressing the next urgent thing. We're constantly getting that quick answer, that next meal, that immediate bill, paid or whatever. And those are all, good to do. They're necessary to do to survive. But in order to get ahead to the point where you're thriving, you have a fulfilling life and you feel comfortable and happy, you also need to focus on what's important.
What's important and non-urgent.
Right. Yes, exactly.
Those are the hardest things to prioritize.
Yeah. It's important to eat, to stay alive.
Yeah.
But it's also important to eat healthy to have a long life. And it's the same thing. You can have
urgent to eat. It's important to eat healthy.
Exactly. You can have a quick, cheap meal, but are you prioritizing your long-term health?
Yeah,
so you can use AI in a quick and cheap way, but is that helping you progress to the life you want to have?
I have kind of a fun question. Well, hopefully it's fun for both of you to kind of wrap up. And you prompted this question on my mind earlier when you were talking about people's fear of AI taking their jobs and stuff. And well, actually, it's going to do all the grunt work stuff we don't want anyways. Yep. So here's my question. Imagine it's 10, 20, 50 years down the road and AI is doing amazing things. What is that world, just to show some hope for what AI can do and good, what does that world look like to you? I'd be curious to see what your world view, what you view that as well. Take some time to think about it maybe.
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll just make a general statement that I find it interesting how bad we are at these types of questions, predicting the ways in which technology will impact our lives and the rate at which it will change. We tend to overestimate the rate of change. A new technology emerges and everyone's like, in 5 years, like self-driving cars. If the predictions of self-driving cars had came true, there would be no more parking lots being built in 2025.
Yeah.
But I just, on my way here, passed a construction site where there was trucks out, creating a brand new, huge parking lot. And I mean, there's Teslas that have self-driving mode, but I'm not seeing, and you see, taxi services and things, but I mean, we are a long ways away before we're replacing parking garages and parking lots. And so that technology.
And maybe the question is less about predicting in 50 years what technology looks like, but what you hope society can become.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good question. But I guess my comment was just that I think that there's going to be a lot of changes, but at the core, maybe not as many as we think.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, our lives today look so different from our grandparents' lives in some ways, but in other ways, they're exactly the same.
Yeah, at a high level.
We get up and we go to work and we take care of ourselves and we're balancing the stresses of life with our relationships and our families. And some families are functioning well and some are struggling, and some individuals are choosing to mistreat others and some are treating others kindly. And we have, there's new problems that have emerged, and there's technology has made some parts of our lives better and has made some parts of our lives worse. So I don't think that life is going to be unrecognizable 50 years from now. I think it'll be more similar to how it is today than we think. It'll be amazing if I want to go to Europe and I can get there in 25 minutes instead of, however many hours it takes to fly there. I think there'll be cool things like that. The availability of information, hopefully the eradication of, a lot of the diseases. We maybe cancer's cured and we've made we've solved, a lot of mental health problems, but I don't know, because then in 2020, a coronavirus emerged and it shut the world down in a period where we were more advanced medically than ever before. So there's all these new diseases and new challenges that we can't foresee. I just think that there'll be amazing opportunities, and hopefully the trend that's been over the last 50 years of women having more opportunities today than at any other time in the history of the world, I hope that continues to happen, and that racism and sexism are at an all-time low. But I don't think life will be fundamentally very different from the way it is today. Family units,
interesting
relationships, those types of things.
Okay, at that level.
Yeah. I think I can't really say what I hope for without having a bit of a prediction, because I like to hope in things that are rooted in, plausibility.
Yeah.
Because if I'm hoping for something that's not plausible, I'm going to get a little depressed about it. Sure. And that's not the point here. Now, what's plausible as far as what I hope, I would have to say first, my prediction is that we're going to see two sides of the future, things that probably look more like a utopia to us now, things that look more like a dystopia. If I had to be specific about that, with the rising technology, I think you're going to see more impoverished areas look more like a dystopia. There's going to be wires everywhere because there's the increase of technology. They need to try to keep up in some way. But it's not going to look, beautiful. It's going to be things, houses stacked on top of each other, density, but not a lot of greenery or life or things that we would find beautiful. And then I think we're going to see really amazing things that incorporate technology into our day-to-day lives and our buildings and our vehicles in such elegant ways. And then we're also going to have so much lush greenery and plants and vegetables because we're understanding more permaculture, urban permaculture type methods, and we can incorporate those better. Air quality is going to be better in these areas. So I think we're going to see polarization. Now, with that prediction, my hope is that despite the fact that polarization and conflict exists, to be human is to have these kind of dichotomies in life. But I hope that people can challenge their ability to think critically and to make proactive decisions rather than reactive decisions. And in doing so, they can continue to shape our world in a conscientious way that is purpose-built, intentionally designed, and based on values that they truly want to see in the world and incorporate that. I hope that people can specialize in what they are best at because they're paid to think, not paid at the outcome of grunt work. And so that when we have these specializations, when we have these passions, we're able to contribute toward an ideal world for all of us based on our personal individual values without judgment and with clarity of thought and intentionality.
It's awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you, Bri. That was very insightful. And I think for our listeners, now you know why we recruited and hired Bri to join our team. So we're happy to have her.
Absolutely.
If you found anything in this episode useful, interesting, valuable, please share it with others. Add a review, subscribe to the podcast, and listen to our other episodes. They're all good.
Thank you, Bri.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for being here.
This is awesome. Love with these conversations.
Okay.